Hello, welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine. Welcome to 2023. Now, if you're in South Africa, you're allowed to wish people Happy New Year till about April. So Happy New Year and welcome to the Year of Wine on Dan Really Likes Wine. Thank you for joining us for a show that kicks off with three of my favourite people in the wine world as we glance into crystal glasses and try and work out what is going to be big in the year ahead. What should you be saving up to look out for, to buy, to stock your cellar with? Who are the winemakers who are going to wow us and dazzle us in the year ahead? What are the varietals we should be having a look at? What should we be maybe setting aside? And what are the estates that have really got something special in store? So joining me in just a few moments, a very special trio of guests. We've got the all-powerful editor of winemag.co.za, Christian Eedes, is with us. I am the wine writer with more awards than any other wine writer in the history of Greater Noordhoek. Malu Lambert is with us, and the coolest man in wine at the moment, Jono Le Feuvre from Hand Drink Solo, is with us as well, and they will be giving us their prescient best as they look ahead to what may or may not happen in the wine world in 2023. Before we go into some news, though, and there's plenty of it because we've been away for a little while, I've just got with me, I know the others have all got wine with them, and I've got an empty bottle. It's been empty for a while. I haven't had it this afternoon, but this was probably my pick over Christmas. 5 litres of 1999 Meerless Rubicon that disappeared faster than I'd anticipated at a Christmas party at Chateau Nickel, but it was one of several bottles over the course of the last month or so that has reaffirmed how good quality South African red wine has got a really nice shelf life. A lot of stuff in the 20 to 30 year gap that I've drunk over the grand summer break, and it's all been really, really good. Bar 1 or 2 corked issues, but that's always to be expected with the older stuff. All right, so wine in 2023, what's to come? We'll find out in a second. First of all, here's some wine news to get the year started. Kicking off with news from the Wine Squad. Now, you might have seen a softish launch this end of last year. It's now picking up a little momentum. Episode 2 is now out. It's a new show launched by Dan Really Likes Wine with some cool and fun presenters who've got maybe not WSET 7s and the like, but they've got a love of wine, an interest in wine, and they'll be talking to other young winemakers, chefs, sommeliers, people in the broader wine industry, and celebrating a growing part of the South African wine industry. Here's a little glimpse of what to expect now that the Wine Squad is up and running. So there we go, the Wine Squad just setting up on YouTube at the moment, but look out for some broader footprints. Senani, David Patson, a couple of other really cool young wine people delivering something a little different to South African wine. We'll keep you posted on where that goes. But the Wine Squad episode 2 now up and running. Look for the Wine Squad on YouTube. Right, elsewhere in the world of wine news, as we look ahead to the start of 2023, we've got a couple of other bits and pieces coming up in just a moment as we look ahead to a busy few weeks. There's the Cape Wine Auction on the horizon at the moment, but also a couple of other new changes and developments in the wine world, and I will get to them in just a second. My screen is frozen for a moment. There we go. This is a Cup Classique, the first Star Cup Classique course. And this is on Saturday, the 28th of January at the Santon Balalaika, the Preti Hotel, or at the Cape Wine Academy in Stellenbosch. I've done this course. It's a very simple entry-level course. Gives you an initial love of sparkles. January is Cup Classique month for the association, and this is Peter Ferreira as well as Heidi Durmany coming together. So if you've got an interest in bubbles and you'd like to learn a bit more, then this is a great one to kick off with. I think I saw Malu doing this course last year. So if you are interested, then head over to the Cape Wine Academy website, sign up, and those first courses at the end of this month, and a chance to get a little better acquainted with South African bubbles. In the Cape Winemakers Guild, there are brand new members and there are brand new proteges. This is always a big announcement. Who will be inducted to the inner circle of South African wine? Well, there you have them. You've got some existing winemakers and you have got the proteges, so the next generation of superstars. The proteges this year are Karabela Mosoleng, Panaso Msomi, and Tola Bekwayo. Then you've got your new names. The name Lariche is certainly not a new one, but Christo, his father Etienne, a member for many, many years. And now Christo at the helm of one of the traditional homes of Cabernet Sauvignon has taken over. Rienan Borman is also joining up, and a warm welcome to him, to the Guild, and to Hannah Storm from out in the Hemel and Arda Valley, and seen now with the wonderful Samantha O'Keefe, who's currently the Vice Chair, alongside Gordon Newton-Johnson of the Cape Winemakers Guild. Look out for all 6 of them coming up in February on the show together as we continue to chronicle the wonderful work that the Cape Winemakers Guild does as one of the real backbones of the South African winemaking community. And Radford Dale have got a new acquisition. It's not land this time, not that long since they took over some property out in Elgin. They're now going to be working at La Residence, Elton John's favourite holiday spot, La Residence, a Radford Dale winery, managing the vineyards, managing the production out in Franschhoek. So that has just kicked off. I've always been the very, very upmarket and exclusive boutique hotel. Now look out for some wine with a guiding hand from Radford Dale, coming to you soon from La Residence out in Franschhoek. And the Cape Wine Auction, that is coming up in about 4 weeks' time. It is the Saturday, the 18th of February. And once again, Raymond Ndlovu as chair, together with the rest of the trustees. So Ken Kinsey-Quick, Paul Kluver, Wendy Applebaum. They're all coming together along with Ian Banner, and they are putting together an evening that last year raised 12 million rand, has raised 117 million rand over the course of the 10 years it has been in existence. I will be down there hosting and co-auctioneering alongside of Ian Banner. It'll be a slightly smaller affair. It's out at Harsendal, but a glamorous one, a glittering one, and one that supports about 20 or so terrific causes across the winelands. There are still the last few tickets available through web tickets, the Cape Wine Auction, in partnership with MasterCard. That's Saturday, the 18th of February. A great night out for some truly terrific causes. And this is brand new. This is Brookdale out in Paarl. I was there for the launch of their field blend last year. Kiara Scott, former protege herself of Duncan Savage, still making the wine, and she's now going to be supplying that wine to their own in-house restaurant, which is going to be open Tuesday to Sunday for lunch, Friday and Saturday for dinner. I'm going to try and get down there in the next month or two. Just on the views, you're in for a treat. But having had a meal at Brookdale last year, I suspect the food will be pretty good as well. So another great destination to go and eat out at in the Winelands, one of many, which just makes it such a great destination for those of us obsessed with food and wine. So that's Brookdale, brand new bistro opening from February. And that is your news for now. Plenty of it as we get into a brand new year. So what does the year have in store? My New Year's resolutions are to keep drinking great South African wine, discovering as much new stuff as I can, and exploring a bit of wine from other parts of the world. Last year was a big year for Greek wine. I've got a couple of other countries I'm looking to explore this year, but South African wine continues to be and always will be top of my list. But what should I be looking out for this year? Are there new varietals? Are there magical new winemakers who this year are going to break free and do something incredible? Are there estates? Are there wine labels that we'll see 2023 is the year they really make a name for themselves. Well, who better to guide us into the new year than three very dedicated wine drinkers and good friends of Dan Really Likes Wine. Christian Eedes is the editor of Wine Mag when he's not shouting at referees blowing DHL Stormers games on his television. Malu Lambert pretty much runs Nerduk and also writes for just about every reputable wine publication on the planet, and does so with a string of awards to match. And Jono Le Feuvre, we're not dispatching wine nobody's ever heard of to different parts of the country from his wine club that has a growing and increasingly dedicated following, is also making some of the most entertaining videos in South African wine at the moment. Collectively, they are my guests for today. So warm welcome to Christian, to Malu, and to Jono. Lovely to have you all on, guys. And welcome back to Dan Really Likes Wine.
It's good to be here.
Good evening.
Well, let's kick off with my fellow DHL Stormers Tragic and our Wine Mag editor. Christian, before we go into 2023, just in a nutshell, 2022 as a wine year, broadly speaking, did it get a thumbs up from Christian, or was it a year that was a bit more of a work in progress?
Hi, Dan. I think the harvest itself has caused winemakers a few headaches. Everybody's talking about very low acidities. Not many of the more serious producers have released yet, so we'll have to sort of take a wait and see approach. But as a year in general, I think South African wine goes from strength to strength. There were some fabulous new releases, typically sort of from 19 for the reds and 21 for the whites. Looked really smart.
Which gives us a good year to look back on, and hopefully an even better year to look forward to. Before we delve into specifics for varietals and estates and what exactly you're looking forward to, Christian, what broadly, coming out of a fairly successful 2022 by your reckoning, sits top of the list of things that South African wine needs to put a bit of focus on for the year ahead?
Well, you've got the establishment, which is pretty much Stellenbosch, churning out classically styled wines very often, and then you've got the new wave, and they're typically sort of Swartland located, but increasingly from more diverse, lesser known regions. And you really, as a punter, you're spoiled for choice. If you like old school Cabernet, you're sorted. If you like whole bunch, low alcohol Grenache, you're also sorted. So it's you're spoiled for choice. There's just so much fabulous wine out there. And the other thing I'd say is you don't have to drink. Don't be stylistically limited. There's so much good wine and so many different styles out there.
Which possibly leads, Christian, to one of the challenges that I think some of our winemakers have been addressing, and that's we've got so much good wine. There is so much great stuff out there. Is perhaps 2023 a year when some of our South African producers maybe need to take stock a little and perhaps streamline a touch and give a little more focus to stuff they're really, really good at, and perhaps trim down on the stuff that they're just very good at?
It's a tricky question to answer in that a lot of the guys and girls can't help themselves. They discover exciting new vineyard of this or that and just can't resist making a wine from it. But in sheer marketing terms, I think there are a lot of portfolios out there that are too large, and that doesn't really help business. But I mean, that's a separate conversation. It's all good for the punter. There are little batches of really exciting wines. Whether it makes sense in business terms or not is a moot point.
I think it's a conversation we'll have to have in more detail on the show a little later on this year. Let's jump down to Nerduk and welcome Malu back to the show. Similar opening to the one with Christian, Malu, before we look into 2023. 2022, was it a landmark year, a splendid year to celebrate for you for South African wine?
I think, hi Dan. I think the wines coming out 2022, we still need to see because they've only been in bottle for not very long. So we're going to have a look in a bit. But what I have noticed is on wider tastings is that there isn't such a great amount of quality coming through because I think COVID really affected sales. And I think a lot of producers have been stuck with a lot of wine in bulk storage or in bottle. And I think there's almost a bit of a frenzy to get rid of some of that. And I think that might affect the quality coming out of 2022. So that is my concern there. But as Christian rightly put, when in tastings, 21 always comes across as quite outstanding, especially for white wines, and 19 for reds.
Which leads us into our 2023, where we'll see more of those 22 and some 21s coming out. But as just a wine year itself, 2023 for a calendar year, it's now underway. I'm sure the first few tastings have already been done. What's exciting you most generally, Malu, about going into this new year of wine?
Well, that's a great segue because the Chardonnay Colloquium happened on Friday. In Elgin, celebrating Elgin Chardonnay and benchmarking against international examples. And I'm very excited about Chardonnay. I am Chenin first, for sure. And the glut of quality we have with Chenin is it's incomparable to anywhere else in the world, really, other than the Loire. But Chardonnay is exciting. I think it's smaller. It's much smaller. I think it's 7th in the National Vineyard at this point in terms of plantings. And it's declining in every other region except Elgin and the Himmelnade, which is actually showed 19% growth. I think that's correct in the last year. So yeah, Chardonnay, I'm hanging my hat on that as the most exciting kind of grape varietal, or not the most exciting, but something I'm excited about, especially because it's been winning international awards left, right, and centre. But yeah, I've got more to say on that, but I don't know how much you need now.
Well, I'm fascinated to take that in the context of the Chardonnay Colloquium. I think Jono was there as well. We'll get a word from him in a moment. But from what you took out of that, given that there were French examples sitting alongside South African varietals and South African varietals from, yes, Himmelnade and Elgin, but also Stellenbosch and other very different parts of the South African wine growing space, it's great to say that there was some wonderful Chardonnay, but a bit more detail. What was it about this South African Chardonnay that was screaming out so much to you and making you so convinced that Chardonnay's got a big year ahead?
So these things are not a definitive scientific study because, in 4 flights, there were 1 international benchmark in each flight. And it's a bit, you can't really say, well, South African Chardonnay is amazing because it completely beat out that USA Chardonnay or that French Chardonnay, etc. But it did make the point, and to start the critical conversation about what makes Elgin Chardonnay in particular distinctive, because Elgin Chardonnay is very different from Stellenbosch Chardonnay. But what stood out with the Elgin Chardonnays was the beautiful natural acid, that refreshing, nuanced kind of structure the wines had. And yeah, they left the international examples in the dust. But as I said, it's not a conclusive study because how can these things ever be?
What then does that say to you as somebody who spends an awful lot of time jumping onto first-class flights around the world to go and drink vast amounts of extraordinarily good wine and then judge it, about how we should be looking at South African wine and judging it? Are we still very much, right, let's set it up against Chardonnay from Burgundy and use that as the benchmark? Or are we more coming into our own and being able to take South African wine just on South African terms?
Well, first of all, you've been reading my dream journal for that first statement there. And then second of all, I always think you should reach for the highest possible mark you ever can, anything in life. So I definitely think we should be benchmarking the best Burgundies we can. Unfortunately, that is a very difficult thing to do because Burgundy is out of the price range of most everybody on the planet at this point. So if you can get your hands on a bottle, I definitely think we should support our producers in tasting the best wines, because you can't make the best wines without tasting the best wines and having some kind of goal in mind. And it's not a stylistic goal, it's a quality goal. I think that's a very important thing to remember because, of course, you are, it's always, if you are taking terroir into context, it's always going to be different. And I think there's a huge opportunity for the South African market in Chardonnay. That's what's exciting me about it, is that because Burgundy is so just out of our price now, that punters all over the world, especially the American market, are looking for an alternative. And I think South Africa is in a very good position there to offer them an alternative. Our Chardonnays often blend, blur the lines between old and new world, and offer a value proposition in terms of pricing. And it's also recognizable. So as much as we love Chenin and bang the drum of Chenin, you ask any American who's, we've had a few down for Cape Wine, and I spoke to them about Chenin, and they love Chenin, but they say, well, it's on the geeky wine bar list, or the Soms love it, this and that, but it's not. It's a foreign concept to them. Whereas Chardonnay is immediately recognizable, and can't afford Burgundy. Guess what? You can afford South African Chardonnay. So, yeah, that's where the opportunity lies, I think.
I love that line, that it's not about copying people stylistically, it's about getting the best quality, and it's a really important way of putting it. Lisa Harlow's busy watching the show. Hey, Lisa, great to see you back down. Hope to pick up some tips for my trip in a couple of months. You have come to the right place, given our 3 guests today on the subject of Chardonnay. Had some 2016 Jezebel from La Vierge, one of the Himalaya estates you don't always hear quite so much about, but terrific to drink it. 2016, a lovely, lovely drinking window, and I think a time of wine I'll be drinking a bit more of as summer continues. Andrew Woolger also watching from over in America. Hey, Dan, Happy New Year to all. Glad you're back at it. Just received our first container of 2023 here in North Carolina with some new producers, Passerine, Labrine, Moya Dornier, and Bobby Wallace, all here as a result of Cape Wine. Jono and I are busy uploading and excited to get these and our regular wines into the market. Cheers, Andrew. Andrew and his team are doing a terrific job of celebrating South African wine over in the Carolinas and surrounds. And as you can see, some lovely wines in there. And he works with a Jono, not this Jono. Let's go to our Jono for the show, and Mr. Drink Solo. Welcome. Lovely to have you here. Quick flick back for you at 22. Not so much as a vintage, because that wine is still to come, but more just as a wine year as a whole. Did it put a smile on your face? Was it a good year you felt for the South African wine industry?
Well, first of all, greetings, Dan. It was an amazing year of, I guess, discovery for me personally, and realizing just how many opportunities South African wine has to carve out very particular niches for itself. And I think what I do is often spend time imagining what can be rather than what is. So the things that excited me in the last year have been things that I think still need to come to fruition, which we can talk about in a bit. But what I loved was a question that you pitched to Christian about whether you thought producers should perhaps trim down their ranges, whether that might help the efficiency of business and things along those lines. And it got me thinking that the South African wine industry will always need these 2 forces for good. So not the dark side and the light side, but rather just two good forces. And that will be elevation and exploration. Those 2 have to work in tandem, right? So we know Stellenbosch Cab or Bordeaux blends are brilliant. So now we can really hone in on those and elevate those, and that's elevation. But if you don't have that exploration force going all the time, then you aren't aware of what opportunities you're missing. If you think back however long ago, I guess 30 years ago, when Forrester and Martin Maynard were saying, hey guys, you need to take Chenin seriously. That was exploration at work. That wasn't innovation. That was saying, look, we can actually shift into a whole new category of wine. And so the things that excited me most were those sorts of adventures. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
It does indeed. I think it leads to an important point on differentiating between producing a certain wine simply because you feel that you actually do need to have a rosé in your lineup, and exploring stuff because you genuinely believe you've got the chance to make something cool or different or exciting, which speaks to a lot of the wines that you deal in, John, and that you send out to your very passionately supportive fan club with your Hand Drink Solo collections. A lot of the wines, varietals that people don't come across often, or from corners of South Africa that are a little off the beaten track. What is it about that wine space that makes you just so excited about it, gets you digging into these more unusual corners of South African wine?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I think just purely selfishly, it's the sort of thing that fascinates me. You think about Tinta Barocca, for example, which is one of the cultivars that has gripped me recently. In Portugal, it's blended away, right? It's used predominantly in the making of port, and there are some table wines, but by and large, it is a kind of an also-ran that gets blended in, and the end product is port. There are very few countries in the world that produce Tinta Barocca as a single cultivar and actually start to celebrate it. Now, I mean, if you look at someone like Ibn Sadi, he's certainly got no problem with Tinta Barocca. Look at Adi Badenhorst, who's producing some incredible single cultivar Tinta Baroccas. You realize our best winemakers in the country are taking this cultivar and celebrating it for what it is. And that's not happening anywhere else in the world. So that story makes me think, well, how much is out there? What can we do with it? And you have young winemakers like Andre Brains from City on a Hill being inspired by these guys, taking a cultivar that is not really vinified on its own anywhere else in the world. And then the young generation starts to do the same thing. So, I mean, Tinta Barocca is just one example, but I think Colombard is another example of, and then we've got boatloads of it, right? So it's not even niche, really. The country is packed full of Colombard, and you've got young winemakers who are saying, hang on, this cultivar has the same sensory potential, possibly, as something like Shannon did 30 years ago. Now, people will argue with me and say that's controversial, but all I'd say is let's just wait and see. Let's give Colombard 30 years and see what we do with that. And people get grumpy with me because it is a dogfight out there. To succeed financially, you have to be smart and efficient, and you're talking about trimming down lines and trying to focus on the things that we're good at. But unless people are still exploring cultivars like Colombard or Tinta Barocca or even Cinsault, we can never have the next revolution. I mean, I'm just so glad, I'm so grateful for the Syrah revolution. Think about what guys are doing in elevated sites in Poker Dry now. You think about Duncan Savage, but the man is on fire, right? You talked about the Rhiannon Borman, Boschkloof, the Epilogue Syrah. To me, that is this combination of a fairly classic cultivar, but with this amazing, revolutionary, exciting new energy, which makes Stellenbosch Syrah far more exciting than Stellenbosch Cabernet, which we all know is world-class. But for me, it's that combination of that discovery, that exploration, which drives the industry forward. That was long. Sorry. Apologies.
Not at all. It's an expert opinion. It leads to the query as to which of these slightly more niche either varietals or styles will be big in 2023. Before we get to that on Jono, Lisa Harlow is in agreement with you. Jono, I completely agree with you on Colombard. Lots of old vines too. It can make sensational wines. And Stephanie Potter has checked in. Hi, Stephanie. Salisbury Wine Shop, North Carolina, is watching. I suspect you're getting some wine from Andrew and his team. Thanks, Stephanie. Great to have you on, and thank you for the support. All right, Christian, let's head back to you as we look into to 2023. Let's start with some white wine. There's already been a bit of discussion on Colombard and one or two others. What's exciting you for 2023 white wine-wise? What do you think is going to really catch the imagination of South African wine drinkers this year?
So I'm with Malu. I think Shannon and Shard are pretty gold standard. I have to be the grumpy old guy here. I think we need to be very, very cautious about Colombard. The reason it's so widely planted, it was intended for distilling purposes, whether that was brandy or industrial alcohol. I mean, good luck to the guys who are working with it. They are making quite interesting wines. But I can't really see a Colombard revolution happening anytime soon. I think, and that's because the grape inherently doesn't have the same pedigree as Shannon or Shard. I think we also need to be a little realistic about what the market actually wants. I was quite shocked during the course of last year to note that Sauvignon Blanc has now overtaken Cabernet Sauvignon as our third most planted variety. And, once again, the guys who are working with Sauvignon are doing a great job, but do we really want to be known for entry-level Sauvignon in the greater scheme of things? I think the world wants Cabernet. The world wants Cabernet is prepared to pay a premium for it. Let's hope that it might be old hat to some wine drinkers, but if South African Cabernet dropped precipitously more, then I don't think our industry would be in a very good place.
What about the kind of, I guess, the interpretation of who wants to drink? What if we've got people who who really want to drink Sauvignon Blanc, and we've got some makers who are making it really well, and that's helping our guys to get through. Where do we strike a balance between kind of what a general consumer wants and what maybe people like the four of us on this show might
No,
think?
it's a great question. So I think we need to make a distinction between fine wine and commodity wine. And the commodity wine is another way of looking at it is a grape-based alcoholic beverage, and then it's about share of throat, and you're up against RTDs and beer and what have you. Fine wine, on the other hand, is what gets us all excited. And I'm not a Sauvignon hater. When it comes to top end Sauvignon, I think it makes some of the greatest wines in the world. And I'm thinking of the Loire and Sancerre and Puy-Fumé in particular, and not to mention New Zealand. But I think South Africa, in recent years, there are more than a handful. There are probably a dozen or maybe 20 so producers who are taking Sauvignon very seriously. They're using oak or clay pots. They're doing wild ferments, and the category seems to have broken through a price ceiling. So, whereas it used to sort of max out at 120 rand a bottle, maybe, you're now paying close on 200 and even over 200 rand a bottle. And those Sauvignons are super exciting, but they're not. They're not wines to put soda or ice in. They're wines for contemplation.
I see Jono has raised a digital hand on this particular topic. Fire away there, Jono.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say first, some of my favorite wines of last year were Sauvignon Blanc or Sauvignon Blanc based blends. And so that the kind of rise of Sauvignon is one of the things that excites me most about the year ahead. But I think Christian is right that it cannot be at the expense of our reputation internationally, and that's been pinned on things like Chenin Blanc and Stellenbosch Cabernet. I do think that we need to keep that passion. When Christian said earlier, people can't help themselves from fermenting this little batch here and this little batch there. I think that impetus, that inability to help themselves is necessary to keep going. So that's exactly why Hand Drink Solo exists, so that those guys can place those experiments. I can find buyers for that wine, and then we can take learnings away from what they do. So I don't think the one needs to be at the expense of the other.
There's been a really good range of examples of those Sauvignon Semillon blends coming out. Constantia doing a lot of them. It's become a hallmark of Constantia, that Constantia white blend wine, like the Takara Director's Reserve White. So there are lots of examples in that space. Malu also, I think, has a comment there. Malu, fire away.
Hi. Okay, so I hate to be the prophet of doom here, but we're ignoring some realities when we talk about the Cabernet Sauvignon debate. First of all, Cabernet Sauvignon terroir is shrinking rapidly, not only because it grows particularly well in only certain places, but because there's property development. There's the farmers giving up and planting whatever else to make a profit. Whereas Sauvignon Blanc, people pretty much grow anywhere, and it doesn't matter. Like, there's this idea about quality when it comes to Sauvignon Blanc. As long as it's drinkable, smash some ice in it, it's fine. You can make a profit. Your business can live another year. Whereas Cabernet, you don't have that luxury of producing a poor quality product. You have to have the best terroir. You have to have the best oak barrels. It has to be mature, forever, Harlan, etc. And I think that's what it's got against it, because the terroir is shrinking rapidly. You look at the Helderbach. I mean, you go to the Helderbach and you just see all those innocuous little townhouses just encroaching onto prime terroir there. Like, it is frightening. I think that's the reality of the situation. Cabernet is too expensive to produce. Sauvignon Blanc isn't. Not particularly good Sauvignon Blanc anyway, and that is just the way it is.
Hey, how worried are you then? Because that's not a very uplifting forecast for 2023. Should I be treasuring my last case of Cabernet Sauvignon before it no longer?
Really
have you officially declared Stellenbosch Cabernet Sauvignon dead?
No.
No, don't you dare put words into my mouth. It's just becoming more of a rarity, and it'll continue to be a rarity. That terroir is precious, and you go to the Helderbach, and the elevations, the mountains, the proximity to the ocean, the soils. It is absolutely beautiful, but it is small. It's very small. So you want to talk about being a world contender in Cabernet? I have my doubts. I really have my doubts there, because I think there's just how can it grow? How can it grow as the terroir is just slowly drying out as it gets closer to that prime bowl of, utopia? That's my worry.
Yeah, there's certainly no questioning the quality, but the quantity's dropping. The Vinpro Day, I think it was last week, showed a rather worrying drop in the amount of vine under hectareage at the moment. And so I fear Malu is more than a little right on that, but there will still be a fair amount of it, and we'll be looking forward to it in 2023, along with others. Red wine-wise, Malu, as our Cabernet shrinks away, what else are you looking at around South Africa that you think is going to stand out in the year ahead?
I love Cabernet, by the way. It's one of my favorite. I'd love to drink it. But other than that, I think with more and more programs coming out, and programs, she says innocuously, I mean, replanting programs coming through our vineyards, because we've got a lot of leaf roll problems in our red wine vineyards. And that's one of the reasons that our white wines always do so well, because white grapes aren't as susceptible to leaf roll, meaning they can age longer. You look at the register of old vines in the country, it's predominantly white vines for this very reason. So, but sorry, I've segued. I'll go back to your question. The light reds, the lighter styles of reds. So your Cinsaults, your Grenache, for me, your I think what I'm finding the most delicious and the most successful are blends of the Rhone variety. So I find maybe your standalone Cinsaults, your standalone Grenache, especially if it's not from old vines, are a little bit simple. But I think as soon as the wizardry of blending comes in with these lighter reds, shall we call them, there's a lot of magic that can be gained from that. And that's how I want to drink wine, and that's where I'm kind of looking. And as always, Syrah. South African Syrah is amazing. Yesterday I had lunch at the Kraal, Justenburg, and I had a Syrah, the Clipperco, and from a single vineyard, young vines, because you're not going to find a lot of old Syrah vineyards. I think there are a couple. One amazing one is the Swanson by Signs of Sinai. It's bush vine out in Stellenbosch, but you don't find a lot of old vine Syrah. And it doesn't matter, because this was an 8-year-old vineyard that I drank yesterday, and it was stunning. It gave me everything I wanted from a Syrah. All those Joseph Night lilies, violet aromatics, a lovely grip on the palate, beautiful juicy fruit. What more do you want? So yeah, South African Syrah. That's where I'm ending this monologue.
So Cabernet Sauvignon is disappearing. Old vines are going. If Derek Watts didn't depress you enough on Carte Blanche last night, we've got Malu Lambert finishing the job for us on Dan Really Likes Wine today. A really, really good points on that Syrah and those lighter blends. Some of Duncan Savage's Follow the Line was drunk here over the weekend, and some of Jean Smith's Damascene Syrah, both absolutely delightful. Comment from Andrew Woolgar. Love listening to John. He needs to taste our new De Postman Grenache Blanc and Carignan soon. So there is a red to fit into those lighter styles. I'd like to see what Andrew is, what Jono is looking out for. But Jono, before that, you had a question.
Well, I mean, I had a question earlier. It feels like we've moved on, but I wanted to just touch on what Malu said more recently about the Rhone style blends. And I think whether you are a climate change naysayer or not, the rainfall in the Western Cape is on the decline. The Western Cape is a water scarce environment already. Forget the drought from 16 to 18. We were already a water scarce environment. So these cultivars that can be dryland farmed effectively and produce great wines are hugely exciting in this environment. So, I mean, we're just lucky that they happen to taste delicious. Your Grenache, your Mourvedre, your Tinta Barocca, your Cinsault, and okay, obviously Tinta's not Rhone, but these cultivars that have the potential to be dryland farmed, I think are going to become more and more important, quite simply because when water starts getting scarce, a luxury product like wine is going to be the first one to get rationed. And that sounds very Mad Max and apocalyptic. We've all been prophets of doom, but I think the ray of sunshine is that when the doom hits, the grapes that can grow without water will be the ones that we'll be celebrating, and we're starting that now, which I think is amazing. And I agree completely with what Malu was saying.
And that speaks to many of the conversations we had last year on Greek wine. Remember, August last year, Dan Really Likes Wine was on location. The things I do for this show and the winemakers we spoke to were producing from grapes. I think we're going to see more and more of. Last year, getting a first hint of a few Greeks, the Assyrtiko out of Jordan, and subsequently from the Malu. I think there'll be a few more, especially from Ibn Sadi, to look out for. Ibn is always someone we look out for. What about the others for you, Jono? The other winemakers, the other wines, the varietals that you think are shimmering excitingly on your 2023 horizon?
Well, I mean, I know we've been talking about Cabernet shrinking. I still think that it is a hugely exciting prospect. And there was a really interesting study from UC Davis that says that Cabernet Sauvignon is as drought resistant as many of the other cultivars that we've just mentioned. So I'm not ready to give up on Cabernet yet. And yes, there are townhouses encroaching, but I think into the future, we need to hang on to that one because it is drought resistant and we've already got a track record for it. So that still excites me enormously. And hopefully the developers will realize, well, I guess this is the thing, right? The market needs to start paying more so that Cabernet Sauvignon vines yield more than a couple of duplexes do. But that is also a conversation for another day.
And one which I look forward to having. A prediction, a sense of someone in particular. Is there a winemaker or two, a winery or two that you're going to keep a really close eye on this year?
Yeah, for me, it's without a doubt JD Rousseau and the guys who are doing at Wildeburg. Christian already highlighted them last year with giving them Winery of the Year. I think it was a great spot. They've got two labels. Actually, they run separately, but made by the same winemaking team. And that is Wildeburg is their kind of flagship range. And then they've got an experimental label called, which I've just gone blank on, The Strange Company. And Strange Company does all sorts of wild and wacky things. They make blends with Crucian Blanc. They do wines. They do a cultivar Durif. They make an amazing underworld blend, which is a blend of Grenache and Mourvèdre. And they're not afraid to be crazy on one side, and then they make far more classic wines under the Wildeburg label, which includes some insane wine blends, both along the sort of Chenin zone and also the Sauvignon Semillon. So for me, Wildeburg and their weird cousin, Strange Company, I think they're one of the most exciting outfits we have right now.
And as Jono said, they came onto the screens of most people last year with a huge thumbs up from Wine Mag. Before we jump back to Christian, a quick comment from you, Malu?
Yes, sorry, just on the Cabernet thing, Jono, and how you still think it has a future. I absolutely agree with you. And they're doing viticultural science work at the Wagevallen at University of Stellenbosch, where they're planting all kinds of different clones of Cabernet on all kinds of different elevations, all kinds of different types of soil, all kinds of different types of irrigation. They are looking at every which way to kind of ensure the future of Cabernet. So the work is definitely being done by very, very smart viticulturists in Stellenbosch because they understand what they have. And I think going into the future, it's going to be more malleable. And as you say, Cabernet is becoming more drought resistant. In its current iteration, I don't know if it's completely drought resistant, but they are finding ways to become more drought resistant. So I just wanted to add that comment.
Probably something we need to do on the show, the world of clones, which all sounds a bit Star Wars-ish, and how important the interpretation of different varietals can be. A drought-resistant grape will have a far greater chance of seeing more of South African wine bottles going forward. Christian, quick word there on Wildeburg. John has given thumbs up as well. A lot of people raised an eyebrow or two when this came out. Hey, who are these guys? We've never heard of them, but they're clearly doing something pretty special.
Absolutely. I mean, John is not on retainer. His words were very kind. Not sure I can add too much. I think they are very exciting. I think JD, the head winemaker, is quite a progressive, forward-thinking guy, and definitely a label to watch. I think the other comment I would make is that there's always sort of, have we reached some kind of plateau of innovation, or, when are we going to see the next Ibn Sadi? And the comment I would make is that there are some incredibly talented young winemakers working in top sellers as assistant winemakers, all making their own labels, small batches of super interesting wine, and that don't necessarily get the attention they deserve yet. And I think it's up to the involved consumer to make an effort to track those down. And may I say, I think wine mags are, a really good conduit to sort of highlighting those guys and girls.
Well, there's a growing army of fans. Amongst them is Angela Lloyd, who's watching over on YouTube. I agree with Jono, and by extension, I'm sure Christian, about Wildeburg and Strange Compagnie. Very exciting wines coming out of it. Angela, good to see you on the show, and good to see you recovering. Angela, a rather nasty and unfortunate accident last year, but seems to be self-medicating with some very nice wine and bouncing back. And hopefully see you on Thursday at the Italian wine celebration that I'll talk more about at the end of the show. Elsewhere, Christian, and the red wine division, and possibly anything else in the broader wine field, where are you looking for people to dazzle us this year?
So Dan, I think an interesting theme that's come out of today's program is, let's not be simplistic. I mean, Cabernet is not about to die out. It might have been overtaken by Sauvignon, but there's still 9,000 odd hectares of it, which makes up 10% of the national vineyard. I think Jono put it very well. As soon as 10 hectares of Cabernet pays more than 10 hectares of housing, then we don't have a problem. And somebody well worth keeping an eye on is like the Ernie Els Stellenzucht Alto operation, all owned by the same German investor, and they're going, they're properly backing Cab as both commercially and in sheer qualitative terms for the future. And there is it is cyclical. So Cab wasn't planted for a while, and then all of a sudden, supply and demand determines the price, and Cab prices start going back up, and which is good for growers, and everything balances out. That's the one point I would make. The other point I would make is I know we all get excited by the Grenaches, and nobody's talked about Pinot Noir, but Grenache, Mourvèdre, Cinsault, Grenache Blanc, Roussanne, Marsanne, they're all terribly exciting. But unfortunately, our top 8 varieties make up 80% of the national vineyard. There are another 92 odd, plus minus 100 different varieties planted. So the other 90 varieties make up 18% of the national vineyard. So as an industry, we have to ask ourselves some very, very hard questions as to the structure of plantings. I mean, it's Jono can, and good luck to Jono if he can find people to take Grenache Blanc off his hands, but that ain't really going to move the needle in terms of how the national vineyard is planted.
It's some honest assessment of where we stand in South African wine. Let's jump back to our prophet of doom to find out which varietal she now tells us won't exist by this time next year. Malu, you've always got a really interesting selection of winemakers on your radar, and you spend a lot of time out meeting people, writing wonderfully about them. Who do you think this year, wineries, winemakers, could deliver us something rather special?
So I'm going to completely ignore your question. No, I'm joking. I'm going to have a bit of more of a general answer, if that's okay. The West Coast is really exciting me for many, many reasons, and the winemakers there within. So I went on a trip late last year throughout the winelands, tasted a lot of wines, drove a lot. It's a huge, huge region, very confusingly, opaquely demarcated, and if you don't know, you don't know. But what I discovered along the way was that this incredible terroir, which borders the Swartland, it's the twin, it's the yin of the yang. There's this weird relationship that happens between the two of them. So while all the Swartland winemakers are making their award-winning icon wines, then they go down to the West Coast and they die for Criff, and then they drink the West Coast wines and they sit on their beaches, and there's just this relationship. And they source a lot of grapes for their Swartland wines from the West Coast, which is something that's becoming more and more apparent. So I'm excited about the West Coast. I'm excited about people like Sakunu Ton. He's young, he's engaged, he's got drive. I mean, speaking to him recently, he loves the West Coast, and he just wants to make it. He wants to give it all the attention and make it a destination in its own right. They've got these amazing sandy vineyards which grow things like Palomino and Chenin and Colombar. I did want to correct everybody earlier. In South Africa, we say Colombar. We drop the D because I don't know why, but that's how we say it. And you know, these amazing kind of sites of Colombar are becoming increasingly interesting, and there's a lot of it. There's a lot of it, and there's a lot to be done. And just to Christian's point earlier about Colombar never being a thing like Chenin, I completely agree. I absolutely agree. It doesn't have the nobility and the heritage that Chenin does. Colombar is actually a progeny of Chenin and Goya Blanc, and it's a bit trickier. It's a bit finicker. Like, you can grow Chenin pretty much anywhere, like Cabernet, like Chardonnay, and you'll be able to develop a pretty good wine. Whereas Colombar, you actually need the right conditions. You don't necessarily need old vines, but you do need the right clones, you do need the right soils, and you do need some water. So just to finish that, what I like about the West Coast is that, let's have a think back to the Swartland. The Swartland was a bulk area. In many ways, it still is a bulk area. But we've had these icon wines come through the Swartland. So we're bedazzled with the Swartland is amazing. But don't forget from whence it came. And the West Coast is very much like that. Many cult wines are now coming out of the West Coast. So I think my prediction is, just like the Swartland, the West Coast will go from bulk to cult.
Well, that's an unintended double endorsement of the Dan Really Likes Wine schedule, because coming up in the next 2 months, we have a special on Colombar. No D, just Colombar. And we're also going to be doing a special on West Coast wine, which is an area I got to spend a little bit of time exploring last year when traveling up to Wolfgat and working their way through their magnificent wine list. I'll be doing it in a bit more detail in the next couple of months with a bit of help from Malu. So thank you for that. Jump over, Jono, just to wrap up with you. I know when we were talking earlier in the week, you were talking about your wish list. I think you've suggested as to what some of that wish list might be. But anything else to add over the course of 2023 that in an ideal world, if all the wine dreams come true, what will be coming your way?
I'd love to see a Platter 5-star rosé. I think that there's no reason why it shouldn't happen. So that is just one thing. I don't need to talk about that anymore. I just want to see it happen. There are winemakers who are starting to make rosé on purpose, as opposed to by accident or with whatever's left over. And so I think it's exciting to see what can come out of that genre. Also, given how marketable it is as a genre, so it feels like people sitting at the top end should be able to enjoy very best stuff, and I look forward to those sort of styles of wine getting credit. And I'd also like to see the rise of mid-tier pinotage internationally. I think that's something that would be very important, which we haven't really talked about this year. But I think what we have, pinotage has this Jekyll and Hyde history. It's got Kanonkorp and Beierskloof and Diesel and Black Label and these incredible internationally renowned wines that are quite expensive even internationally. And then you have history of terrible, rotten banana, bubblegum, and rubber pinotage. But I think that for South Africa to capitalize on our very own homegrown cultivar, we need to see a growth in the mid-tier pinotage, the Kanonkorp Cadet or the Dimmersdal pinotage, or that kind of £20 a bottle or $20 a bottle pinotage. And that's, I think, it excites me enormously. And pinotage will always be part of the South African narrative for me, and we haven't touched on it, so I wanted to bring that up.
Wishful thinking or a very educated guess, we'll be able to tell you in a year's time. Just quickly, John, if people want to find out a bit more, follow the incredible videos, get their hands on some of the wine that you've found in strange parts of South Africa, where do they find you?
Yeah, well, you should come find me at handdrinksolo.com. So we send out a curated case every month of 6 wines, and with each wine, you get a video, 4 or 5 minutes, which is really me kind of bubbling over with the excitement I have as to why these wines are exciting and why they're part of the future of South African wine. So every bottle has a video with it, and we courier nationwide, handdrinksolo.com.
There we go. Look out for that. Thank you, Jono. Before we wrap up with Christian, just back to Malu for a moment. Very quickly, Malu, is there, I'm trying to remember because you're always doing a million things. Is there a book just out, a book just about to come out? Where does that project sit? And what else is really exciting for Malu Lambert in 2023?
So there's a book out on Klein Constantia. I was tasked with the contemporary Renaissance. The expert on South African wine in history, Joanne Gibson, wrote the history part. So that's out now. But I have been approached to do another book this year, and it's Mum's the Word until confirmed. But it's going to be a very exciting book about something all close to our hearts. But you'll have to wait and see.
All right. The End of Cabernet Sauvignon and Stellenbosch by Malu Lambert will be out a little later on this year. I see Gerard Holden's dropped in from Franschhoek towards the end of the show. Good afternoon from sunny Franschhoek, Dan. Gerard, lovely to have you. We drank some of Gerard's Elysium at a dinner I hosted for IWC last week. It was splendid. Christian, as we wrap up, it's been a really cool way to start the show. I think I saw earlier today news of the prescient reports coming again. So I presume that's going to be another highlight of a busy year for you and the Wine Mag team.
Certainly will be. It's great to have Preston on board again. But I kind of feel, to go back to your, it appears we share a love of the Stormers. And I feel we've been trying to get all three of us to sort of pick a Damien Willems out of obscurity as the next Springbok superstar. And I just want to reiterate, we all talk about the new wave, and then sort of blithely include Eben Saadi and Adi Badenhorst, who, if I'm not mistaken, have both now turned 50. So they're not youngsters by any stretch of the imagination. And I would just, I think I said as much earlier, but it's the 30-something kids that are, as I say, working as assistants, just getting their brands going, who are really, really exciting. And I think of somebody like Jasper Wickens, who was assistant to Adi. I think of Albert van Niekerk, who's assistant to Peter Allen Phillison. There's some youngsters in the Walker Bay region who like really just forging new paths. And if you're a little tired of the Stellenbosch Old Guard, and if you can't get your hands on the strictly allocated cool cats, then those are the wines to look out for.
Well, that sounds like the making of another show, The Next Generation. Thank you, Christian, for the heads up, and another reminder that it's not just absolutely fantastic terroir and brilliant varietals and lovely climate, but it's some seriously good winemakers who are so crucial to keeping South Africa firmly on the wine map. Helped, of course, by some outstanding wine media, and we've certainly had those with us today. Lisa Harlow, as we wrap up, all sounds very exciting for 2023. I'm sure I'll be drinking Cabernet and Colombard with a D and lots of other South African wines. Guys, thank you all very, very much for being part of the show today. It was lovely having you along, some really cool insight into what to look out for. And I think if it's possible to sum up the entire hour, it's just that it looks like a really exciting year ahead, and that there are so many different varietals for us to explore and to enjoy and to see come out of this ridiculously talented winemaking community that we have. So my request for you, and it's a big one, but I think the three of you might be up for it, is to keep trying those 15, 20, 25 wines a day that you all do, and make sure that you keep sending the feedback back to us so we know exactly what to keep drinking. Christian, Malu, Jono, thank you very much. I look forward to having you all back on Dan Really Likes Wine again soon.
Thank you, Dan. Rock on.
So there we go. Christian Eedes, editor of Wine Mag. Malu Lambert, who writes for 8,217 wine publications at the moment. And Jono Le Feuvre, who this year hopes to dispatch the first wine somebody else has heard of from his incredible Hand Drinks solo selection. What a way to start 2023. And we continue, I think, on something of a high. I'm going to be down in Cape Town on Thursday. The inimitable Winnie Bowman, who I should be trying to avoid because she keeps trying to feed me brandy out the bottle, is involved with a great celebration of Italian wine. as some of the best of Italy comes to Cape Town. It is a selection of masterclasses, of trade show, of tasting and exploring Italian wine and getting a feel for yet another great winemaking country. And we are seeing more and more Italian wine in South Africa. I think the percentage grew again last year, so I'm really looking forward to that. I think Winnie will be a guest. We'll also have some guests from the Italian wine industry and a celebration of all things Italian. I'm going to be in Italy in May, so this will give me a look ahead to what is on the cards for my wine drinking adventure. For now, some Monday night wine to go and look out for. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Huge thank you to Christian, to Malu, and to John, and to Ronaldo behind the scenes. And we'll see you back again on Thursday. Enjoy your wine drinking week, and we'll see you then. Goodbye.